Okay, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us for the Salesforce Admins webinar, Using Personas for Salesforce Permissions and Security. So I'm pleased today to be joined by Alex Sutherland, who is the VP of Strategy for CRM Science. You can follow him on Twitter at Apex Sutherland, which is a great Twitter handle. My name is Mike Gerhold. I am the Director of Admin Evangelism at Salesforce. You can follow me on Twitter at Mike Gerhold. Of course, it wouldn't be a Salesforce presentation without a forward-looking statement slide. So, Salesforce is a publicly traded company. Please make all of your purchasing decisions based on current features and functionality. Now, of course, we mentioned Twitter, and we want you to be social with us as well. So you can follow us on Twitter at Salesforce Admins, no I. You can connect with other awesome admins using the hashtag AwesomeAdmin. If you're on Facebook, be sure to stop by our page and give us a like. We are Salesforce Admins on Facebook. And on LinkedIn, we are also Salesforce Admins. We have a ton of really cool videos. If you visit our YouTube page to find us, just go to Salesforce Admins. So with that, I understand you could have questions. I always have questions on these webinars. We want to make it easy for you to ask questions and get your questions answered. You can join our admin webinar group at bit.ly/admin webinar group. Make sure to pay attention to those capitalizations. If you're logged into the success community, just look for Salesforce Admins webinar. And you don't have to wait to the very end to ask your question. You can go ahead and post it in the webinar group. And that way we have questions for the live Q&A at the end when Alex is free. So your question may be chosen. If not, we will be sure to follow up with you. So Alex, I think I have all of the prerequisites out of the way, which means we can get our webinar kicked off. So I'm going to hand it over to you for today's agenda.
All right, thanks a lot, Mike. Welcome, Salesforce admins. Thanks for joining us today for a talk about using personas for Salesforce permissions and security. Here's what we're going to talk about today. First, we're going to explain the reasons and motivations for using personas to help you organize an approach to configuring permissions and security in your Salesforce environment. Then we're going to talk about how to develop personas and how to translate persona behaviors into permission configurations. Next, we'll go through a couple examples of building permission and security configurations for some specific personas. Then we'll quickly touch on some lightning considerations for user experience and permissions. And lastly, we'll review some additional resources and answer a few of your questions. All right, let's get started by understanding why we should use personas and what they are. The main reason we came up with this approach and wanted to talk with you about it today is that so many Salesforce customers are struggling to manage a plethora of permission and security configurations, particularly large numbers of profiles. Even with the advent of permission sets, profile multiplication, as I like to call it, is still a significant problem for many Salesforce admins. Besides profiles and permission sets, there are a number of other configuration components that make up the total permission and security configuration for a Salesforce user. This can be a bewildering and overwhelming puzzle for Salesforce business analysts and admins to solve, much like staring at a pile of jigsaw puzzle pieces without a picture of the finished puzzle to use as a reference for sorting them out and putting them together. What we want to do today is give you a plan for finding that picture of the completed puzzle through a user experience design concept called personas. Personas are going to give you a construct or a framework that will help you simplify and organize the permission and security configurations for your users, and will help you explain it confidently and succinctly to other people in your organization. A few things that we want to make sure we emphasize up front. Please don't equate profiles with personas. Profiles will be assigned to personas, but they're not the same thing, and they are not necessarily in a one-to-one relationship with each other. As we're going through this, please view this process as an opportunity to enhance your users' experience with Salesforce, which will hopefully increase their adoption and engagement with your applications. Security configuration is a significant part of what controls a user's experience in Salesforce, what apps and tabs they can see and have to sort through, what page layouts are assigned to them, what fields they see on those page layouts, and so much more. The more unnecessary functionality you remove from their view, the less they have to mentally process and learn how to navigate. Both security and user experience benefit from a less is more approach to design, so I'd encourage you to adopt that as a core principle as you think through these concepts. All right, so what are personas? They're a concept developed back in the 1990s to help application designers and architects describe the types of users interacting with their applications. Much more important than the user's titles, organizational roles, demographics, or other personal characteristics are the behaviors and use cases that groups of users identify and perform. These behaviors are often common across multiple traditional segments of users and create clusters of functionality that help us understand the highest priority and most frequent tasks that users need to perform throughout their day. The Salesforce user experience team, who performs all the research and designs the use cases and user interfaces for the Salesforce platform, has collaborated with the Trailhead team to create a trail and several modules to help you learn how to configure your Salesforce environment with the concepts of user experience design and personas. I would highly recommend that you invest the time to go through the Build Better with UX trail and especially the UX Personas for Salesforce module to help you understand these concepts and how to apply them to your Salesforce environment in your particular organization. Okay, now let's talk about how we develop personas and apply them to our security and permission configuration. In lieu of everyone completing the UX Personas for Salesforce Trailhead module, I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes overview of how to create personas for your organization and Salesforce environment. First, you need to observe and interview your users and gather information on what tasks they need to do on a daily basis. This is a great opportunity to implement one of Mike's core Salesforce admin concepts, SABWA, Salesforce admin by walking around. I would strongly encourage you to do this, either in person or virtually, if you're not physically located with all your users, to first observe your users interact with your Salesforce applications and then talk to them about why they use them the way that they do. This is one of the most basic forms of user experience research, and it can be so enlightening to just observe and listen to the users because you see their natural inclinations and habits, and it can help you realize what you can do to improve their experience or train them better on how to take advantage of the features of the application. If you have the opportunity to do so in your organization, you could also put together a simple survey for your users to tell you what tasks they perform most frequently and what features they need in order to be effective at their jobs. You might need to request approval from your organization to conduct a mass survey of your users, so make sure you go through the proper channels to obtain that approval. When you've completed as much research as you can in the time you have, and I would recommend putting a time box on it of a few weeks to a month at the most, you'll need to take that research and look for common behaviors and patterns among your users. Once you've identified an appropriate group of common behaviors and patterns, such as updating existing prospects and customers, then you can create a name for that persona, such as Pipeline Builder, to help your organization understand what their primary purpose is. Before we look at some persona examples, let's talk about how we translate persona behaviors into permission configuration. Profiles are the foundation for user security and experience, so you want to try to keep them as simple and common as possible. Identify the objects, fields, and application permissions that apply to as broad a set of users as is appropriate for your organization. For example, all sales users should be able to read, create, and edit lead records that they own or are shared with them for editing. Therefore, we'll include those permissions in the sales user profile. Permission sets enable a one-to-many relationship between users and permission configuration and give admins the ability to build combinations of specific features for unique personas in your organization or even custom permission configurations for individual users. For example, permission to delete and transfer lead records could be included in a lead management permission set and assigned to a handful of users that are responsible for that function in your organization. So let's make all this theory practical with a couple of examples. This example is borrowed from the Sales Cloud personas in the UX Personas for Salesforce Trailhead module, where the Salesforce user experience team shares with us what some of their key personas look like across the entire Salesforce platform. This example is probably a bit broader and more generic than what you might create for your organization, but I think it is a good sample and template to use as a framework for building your own personas. A pipeline builder focuses on prospecting, qualifying, and nurturing leads. They've expressed their primary purpose in the sales application to be organizing their daily activities and prioritizing their effort in the lead generation and qualification process. We've identified that their top activities are entering new prospects and customers, updating existing prospects and customers, and logging activities with those prospects and customers. In most organizations, pipeline builders would probably be identified as the inside sales team. We can see that they spend the bulk of their day entering new lead records and updating existing ones, and also engaging in lead nurturing activities, probably in conjunction with the marketing team. They also spend a portion of their day prospecting for new opportunities in existing accounts, so they'll likely need access to customer accounts, contacts, and opportunities. Here we have a basic persona security configuration list for our conceptual pipeline builder user persona. You can see at the top we've identified what user features they will need. Marketing user will enable them to view campaigns and create and modify campaign member records, which can help track ROI of our various lead generation campaigns. We've also selected the Salesforce One user option so that the pipeline builders have a responsive user interface when they log into Salesforce with a mobile device. We've selected the sales user profile for this persona because pipeline builders need to primarily access and interact with the objects and fields that apply to most users in sales. As we stated earlier, we want to keep profile configuration as simple and common as possible so that we can reuse it across multiple personas. Next, we'll use permission sets to enable the functionality that is unique to the pipeline builder persona. The first permission set will apply as lead generation, and it might include permissions like the ability to import leads and transfer leads. Pipeline builders will likely be working in a telesales call center environment, so we're going to create a permission set that grants access to telephony integration applications to support functions like click to dial and call tracking. Email integration is going to be important for pipeline builders, so we'll also assign them a permission set that gives them access to the connected apps that integrate with their inboxes to capture email interactions with leads and contacts. The Salesforce role hierarchy is very important when it comes to managing who sees what data in Salesforce. Roles should be set up to blend personas with your reporting hierarchy. In this case, we're going to assign the pipeline builders to the inside sales team role. We'll use the roles to establish some sharing rules between pipeline builders and the outside sales team. First, we'll implement a rule that gives the pipeline builders permission to read and write lead records owned by the outside sales teams. They'll also need to view and update account records owned by the outside sales teams, so we'll create another sharing rule to enable that. Lastly, we want to grant pipeline builders the ability to see existing opportunities on accounts but not edit them. There's more permission and security configuration we could add to the list, but this should be a fairly universal foundation for persona-driven permission and security configuration. For comparison, let's look at the deal closer persona created by the Salesforce user experience team. Deal closers are more driven by their task list and opportunity pipeline, and they're generally on the road and out in the field meeting with prospects and customers. Their top activities are logging calls, emails, and notes, updating existing prospects and customers, entering new prospects and customers, and reviewing and working through lists of leads and opportunities assigned to their territory. A deal closer spends the majority of their day prepping for sales calls and meetings, doing demos, preparing quotes and contracts, conducting sales meetings, and hopefully winning opportunities. Now let's look at the deal closer persona permission and security configuration and see how it compares to the pipeline builder configuration. As you can see, we have two of the same user features enabled, marketing and Salesforce One, but we've added a third feature, allow forecasting, so that deal closers can provide their managers with forecasts of the deals in their pipeline. We're utilizing the same sales user profile for deal closers as it enables the same core functionality that is needed for everyone on the sales team. For permission sets, you can see that two key differences for deal closers are configure price quote functionality enabled through the CPQ user permission set, so the deal closers can do complex quoting in their opportunities, and then when those deals get in the final stages of negotiation, they have the contract generation permission set to enable them to create contracts and put them into the approval process. Deal closers live in their email, so we've assigned them the email integration permission set to help them capture all the key email activity around their deals. One key thing to remember about permission sets is that they are additive, i.e. they grant permissions, never subtract them. So that's why you want to keep your profile configuration as lean and common as possible, giving you the flexibility to assemble the features needed for a given persona using permission sets instead of many different iterations of profiles. Roles can be configured in many different ways, but for this example, we're going to assume a regionally aligned sales team. So we'll assign the deal closers to the appropriate region in the role hierarchy. This enables us to create sharing rules between the deal closers and pipeline builders. In this scenario, deal closers will need to read leads owned by the inside sales team, read and write accounts owned by inside sales, and read and write opportunities owned by inside sales as well. There's certainly much more that we could add to these lists and much more that we could discuss around exactly how to implement these features for your organization and environment. But hopefully this gives you a good understanding of the core concepts of using personas to build appropriate permission and security configurations for your users. Now that we have configurations for your personas defined, we need to map users to those personas. The easiest way to do this is to create a custom pick list field on the user object and set the value appropriately for each user. If you have a lot of users in your org, then you could export them to a CSV file, set the persona field values offline, and then update the user records with a data load. Then you have a map of which persona primarily applies to each user right in your Salesforce environment. Lightning Experience brings us some new dimensions and paradigms for designing user experience, and to some extent, permissions and security configuration. Whereas in Classic, you primarily assign page layouts at the profile or record type level, Lightning Experience starts with a default page assignment at the org level and then enables you to override that default at the app, record type, or profile level. As you transition from Classic to Lightning and design rich new Lightning pages, you'll need to change your approach to assigning those pages to take advantage of this new model. The key thing to understand is that user experience and security configuration becomes much more app-centric in Lightning Experience versus profile-centric in Classic. With new app-level feature configuration like the utility bar, you can make the interface and experience much more contextual and focused for your users. Okay, let's review some of the key resources you can use to explore this concept further. The core resource for this topic, as we mentioned before, is the UX Personas for Salesforce badge on Trailhead. The Salesforce User Experience team has provided a bunch of great resources in this module and in the broader Build Better with UX trail. I would highly recommend investing the time to complete this entire trail. For a much more in-depth treatment of Salesforce permissions and security, check out the Protect Your Salesforce Data trail. It will help you understand many more aspects you should consider when building permission and security configurations for your personas. The Salesforce User Experience team publishes a lot of thought leadership around research and design on their medium.com channel, and they've published a couple really helpful articles about researching and creating personas, which we've linked to here. I would highly recommend reading those articles and subscribing to their channel to continue to learn more about user experience design thinking. Lastly, the Salesforce Developers blog recently published an extensive article that uses some clever animations to explain the Salesforce data security model visually. If you have a hard time understanding the difference between roles and profiles and groups, permission sets and sharing rules, and other elements of Salesforce security, you'll probably find this article very helpful. It's written for anyone who builds apps in the Salesforce platform, not just developers. All right, that's all I've got for today. Mike, back to you.
Awesome, thanks, Alex. So we have time for Q&A. So I want to remind everybody, if you have questions, be sure to post them to our admin webinar group. You can find that at bit.ly/admin webinar group, or if you're logged into the Salesforce Success community, just type in Salesforce admins webinar. That way we have record of Alex can go in there and give you a great explanation. We also have a survey you can fill out. It's at a different bit.ly/AW-survey personas. And of course, the slides will be at bit.ly/personas for access. And of course, it looks like a few people registered late. So just a reminder that the webinar was recorded and it'll be posted to the same page you used to register and also our Salesforce admins YouTube page. Okay, so Alex, I have a bunch of questions because I'm still wrapping my head around personas. Can you help me understand, could a user have more than one persona?
Absolutely. The purpose of a persona is to understand what a user is doing for a particular purpose. So somebody could be a pipeline builder most of the time, but sometimes they're a deal closer. So you might want to give a user the security configuration for both of those personas. But you want to identify the primary persona that applies to each user. And Salesforce emphasizes this a lot in the resources they've shared about personas, that they're not mutually exclusive, but it's really helpful if you identify the primary one for the user and emphasize and try to guide their experience towards the things that they spend most of their time doing. So definitely could have more than one, but most of the time people are going to have just one persona.
Okay. So I'm always trying to do things as fast as possible. Is there a way that I could automate some of the security configuration based on the persona I set for each user, maybe with like a custom pick list field?
Yeah, so the concept that I've got, I haven't had a chance to build it out completely yet, but you could build a custom app to manage your personas in Salesforce, and so that's something that we're looking at doing with our team, and organizing all the different configuration and permissions that would apply to a persona. And then some of the things you could do with button click automation, like workflow rules or process builder or flow, and some of the things you might need to go to code to automate the setup of. But definitely, could start with some simple things, maybe setting some flags on user records, things like that, and then go into more complex stuff like assigning permission sets and so on with more complex automation. So definitely things that we're going to explore doing on the Salesforce platform, and for obviously larger organizations, that adds more and more value with the higher number of users that you have.
Gotcha. So on your side-by-side persona comparison slide, because I want to go back to that because I think it's really cool. You point out that both the persona pipeline builder and deal closer are using the same profile.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean, and then you use different sharing rules. When I'm setting up profiles in an org, as a best practice, I should set them up very restrictively. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. The profiles establish that foundation, that baseline for a user. So you want to keep them really limited in terms of what they enable. And that gives you the most flexibility with permission sets to add more permissions for users to use. So the orgs that have been around for a long time, especially before permission sets were available, the only option they had was to take profiles and clone them and create different iterations. So some large enterprise customers that have been with Salesforce for a long time have got hundreds of profiles in their organization. It can become really difficult to manage. There's some great tools out there that are free in the community to compare profiles and try to make managing them a bit easier. But really what your goal should be is to reduce those down to the core features that are needed for the broadest set of users that you can identify, and then move more specific features into permission sets, and that will make your life a lot easier as an admin.
It's like you're reading my mind and the community's mind. So when you find those resources, there's somebody who has 110 profiles and they want to know how to compare and eliminate duplicates. We can post those links to those as well. But I also ran into somebody that had an org that I think, kind of you mentioned back in the old school days of, they had 250 profiles and they needed to merge one Salesforce org with another, much in the same way, there's the admins that had lots of profiles before permission sets. Where do you begin with that? Yeah,
that's a really kind of a tough problem to look at the whole thing and try to figure out where to start. But what I've encouraged admins that I've talked to and customers that I work with is, don't try to look at solving that entire problem all at once. Let's focus on one persona. Let's try to identify one persona and do an end-to-end definition of that persona and then security configuration for them. And once you've got that process down, it's easier and easier to repeat it with more and more personas in your organization. So it's not something that you've got to do all at once and boom, switch everybody's configuration across hundreds or thousands of users. You can do it very small segments at a time, one persona at a time, really. So start with the users that you're closest with, either physically or virtually, and design the experience for them and migrate their configuration, see how it works, learn from that experience, and then replicate it with additional groups. And you can do it steadily, and before you know it, you'll have those hundreds of profiles boiled down to maybe dozens or less.
Awesome. Alex, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to share personas with us so that we can be better Salesforce admins around accessibility and security. And just a reminder, if you do have questions that pop up after watching this webinar or watching any of the replay, you can go to the Salesforce admins webinar group on the Success community, bit.ly/admin webinar group. And of course, the video and the slides will be available at the URL that you used to register. So with that, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day, and have a great Wednesday.